Welcome to Her Remarkable History. Remember, to support our channel, please subscribe. The truth about Catherine Parr. Why did Henry VIII choose her? Now throughout history, there has been a question, not often asked but thought of by many. There was a tyrant king with a track record of making his way through wives and beheading 2 out of 6. After his first wife, Henry VIII opted for a younger model and someone whom he could create a male heir with. But after his 5th marriage to the teenage Catherine Howard, why did Henry choose to marry Katherine Parr? What was his reasoning for choosing a wife whom, unlike his previous relationships, was mature in nature? And it raises the question, was the marriage a case of true love? Or was it just a marriage of convenience for the fast-aging king? It was during the plague of 1543 in London that 24 guests found themselves inside a small chapel at Hampton Court Palace, and Henry VIII prepared to marry, unbeknown to him, for the 6th and final time. The wedding was a low-key event, and it took those in diplomatic circles in London by complete surprise. Henry is recorded as being extremely enthusiastic, and he had a joyful countenance as he married his new queen in a private manner. He was now a 52-year-old ailing king, and his new wife was 20 years younger than he, at not quite 31 years of age. Catherine Parr had been married and widowed twice before Henry, and she was as such an experienced stepmother. Would these be factors that would have made Catherine a marriage of choice or common sense? Would there be any love between the pair, or even passion? Victorian historians believed Henry to have been an easily irritable tyrant, and Catherine to have been a worthy matron. But recent research into the matter has the truth pointing in a different direction. You see, it is believed that Henry was truly looking for a wife, not a nurse nor a homemaker. Henry wanted a companion for his bed, potentially to create more heirs, and someone who could carry the role of queen consort impressively. Catherine was no stranger to her duty, and having given up the man she loved to marry the king, she was full of determination to not let that sacrifice be in vain. She could engage in polite conversation, and was soothing to the royal brow. It is Catherine's determination to have a deep and meaningful connection with her husband that is attributed to being a key factor as to why her life was spared in the May of 1546. Catherine was a slim and beautiful red-headed lady, and it was no surprise that Henry was drawn to her. She had an unimpeachable reputation, and her beliefs and spiritual nature held her apart from her predecessors, and Henry knew this. Although Henry is believed to have been impotent, Catherine undoubtedly took her vows to be bonaire and buxom in bed and in board. Milk baths were regular to keep her skin soft, and perfumes were ordered the day after the wedding for her bedchamber at Hampton Court Palace. Catherine is seen to have been very determined to make both her body and her bedchamber as enticing as she could. Now, I am sure that the sight of Henry in his nightshirt may have been a daunting sight, and it was noted that even before his final marriage that he was already very stout and growing larger each day. And it is even believed that at his heaviest he was as big as 3 men, and that his legs were left scarred from the pain and the disease. His legs were also a reason why Henry is thought to have gone through more than 300 pairs of hose in a year. Now, Catherine was married to this man, and it wasn't long until he doted on her. But did she love him? From the beginning, she most certainly did not. She was forced to give up her love and advance her family, because she could not refuse the king. Catherine was dutiful, and she made it her mission to convince herself that her situation was God's will. But that being said, she was a loving and optimistic woman, and is known to have been very intelligent. An opportunity had come her way, and so Catherine thought hard about how she could turn it to her own advantage. This strategy included developing a close relationship with the 3 royal children, and the king was at the centre. Henry is dubbed a tyrant king, but at the heart he's thought to have been a sad and unhappy man, especially after the failed disaster of a marriage to the teenage Catherine Howard. Catherine Parr saw a man who had a need and a want for love and attention, and the circumstances made way for Catherine to establish herself quite quickly as a major influence in his life. The plague meant that Henry and Catherine were unable to enter London for around 6 months, but it also meant that it was only each other's company that occupied their time. This became a perfect foundation for their relationship, and Catherine found herself being showered in gifts and jewels and beautiful clothes, and she was even entrusted to rule as regent whilst Henry was away in France in 1544, and he even greatly hoped that one day he would have children with her. The couple were very similar in their interests, with both liking hunting and archery, as well as music, dancing and books. You see, Catherine was a graceful dancer, and Henry was a cultured man, who was delighted that his queen commanded respect from the ambassadors. Both Catherine and Henry were committed to the 16th century belief in lifelong learning, and Catherine then began to brush up on her Latin, and then in time she wrote religious books and committed her advancements to the cause of religious reforms. In 1545 she became the first Queen of England to be published when copies of her prayers or meditations were produced by the king's printers. Her influence over Henry seemed unshakable. Now the year 1546 was the last full year of the king's life, and it was here that Catherine's position as queen came under threat. You see, as Henry's health declined, all the negative parts of his personality were amplified. The awareness of his own mortality caused an inner turmoil. There was a power struggle arising for the future of England, and his loyal wife, who had felt secure in the affections of her husband, and in return gave her devotion, found herself at the centre of that struggle. The struggle and the plots against Queen Catherine Parr were recounted in a dramatic fashion by John Foxe nearly 20 years later, and by the time it was being depicted in the storybooks, all those who knew her had died, so the details in the records could not be checked or verified. Catherine kept her matters to herself, but it is certain that the bitter fight between the forces of religious reform and conservatism came close to her. Her ladies became targets in the search for banned books, and an outspoken reformer, thought to have been associated with Catherine, Anne Askew, was tortured to reveal links between herself and those who served the Queen. Anne was burnt at the stake, having revealed nothing, but even so, Catherine hastily hid many items in her own book collection, changed locks on trunks and coffers, and summoned her sick uncle to support her at this difficult time. I do believe that Henry knew of Catherine's beliefs and interests and her views right from the get-go, and John Foxe felt that he must have found them increasingly irritating, especially as she presumed to contradict him in public, but not so much the content of her views. But Catherine had also failed to provide him with a child, and time was passing them by. Henry had a tendency to get bored of his wives easily, so it is thought that this could have been a factor also. Yet, whatever happened in the summer of 1546, it did not destroy their marriage. Perhaps Henry did, as Foxe claimed, take a penitent Catherine on his knees and reassure her of his love. Henry seems to have been eager to make amends by ordering all manner of jewels, pearls and precious stones, skins and sable furs for our dearest wife the Queen. But nevertheless, Catherine was well aware that her position had changed, and after a second honeymoon in the autumn of that year, they parted before Christmas. Henry felt he needed to put his kingdom in order and prepare for his death. There is no evidence that Queen Catherine ever saw him again, and her New Year's gift to Prince Edward was a portrait of herself with his father, a telling clue that she had hoped to cling on to the influence she had once enjoyed. Henry died on the 28th of January 1547, and Catherine's hope that she would be made regent for the boy king was dashed when Edward Seymour took power. Then, in the spring of 1547, Catherine secretly wedded Edward's younger brother, Thomas, whom she certainly loved, though the pair hoped also to regain control of the royal children through their union. This marriage, however, was not plain sailing for the now Dowager Queen, and things were made worse when her new husband was inappropriately grooming Princess Elizabeth, who happened to live in Catherine's care. Catherine then died shortly after the incident due to postnatal complications, leaving a daughter, Mary, on the 5th of September 1548. Catherine's death was tragic and her life was certainly remarkable. She had found that a marriage to King Henry was difficult, but she persevered and set out to win his heart, something she managed to greatly succeed in. Thank you for watching, and to support, please subscribe to Her Remarkable History. Thank you.